Chapter 3. She got lost in all the things in the store. So many gadgets and tools. There were endless drawers filled with screws and parts. Things she could only guess at their purpose, strewn about in varying states of disrepair. Curiosity drove her to pick up some tools that lay on a bench and begin to disassemble a gizmo full of springs. She was completely engrossed in the mechanism when he returned a few hours later. "I figured you might want to get out of the workshop and stretch your feet a bit," he said after putting away his bag and washing his hands. She was a little anxious at the thought, but remembered her original goal for this adventure of hers, to explore and experience. "Okay, yes, good idea." "Well, all right then." He opened the door and held it open for her. "After you, princess." She stepped past him and out onto the dusty street. There were a few people about, most of them carrying packs of something. He locked the door and said, "If someone asks who you are, just tell him that you are my new apprentice." He led her down a path that curved around a line of shacks not unlike his. As they walked, he pointed out different places and told her the names of people who owned them or worked there and what they did. He explained customs and behaviors and told her how to explain her ignorance of them if confronted, although she was pretty sure she would be fine. Just ask people questions about them. Most people prefer to talk about themselves. Same as above, she thought. She knew this trick already from her mother, who seemed to have the ability to steer people's attention at will. Thinking of her mother made her think of the decoy. She had not expected to be away this long. She had mentioned this to Sai and the unsolved problem of how to get back up. He had told her that he would help her figure it out somehow. They had walked around the market floor for a while when he said, "Time for dinner." He led her to the lift. On their way, they passed some of the kids that had chased her. They smiled at her, seeming not to recognize her as they passed. She had clearly the wrong idea about them. The lift took them up to the dinner floor, where she had first come on her way down. This time, most people completely ignored her, although quite a few did look her over in interest, especially the boys. "Why are they looking at me now?" she asked, wondering if her new disguise was failing to fool them. "Because you are very pretty," he said. "Beauty attracts attention, especially in a dump of a place like this." He picked out a seat for them and told her to wait while he ordered food. Someone came and put a glass in front of her with some bitter juice. While they ate, he told her about their fading ability to grow food, how their stocks of seeds kept shrinking. Replacement parts were increasingly hard to find, calling for increasingly creative repairs. She took all of this in while looking at the people around them. There were so many of them. The tension she had felt before was gone, although she was still not comfortable in the crowded space. She noticed another little bud robot rolling around on some errand. I was just about to ask Sai about it when he said, "I've thought about how to get you back up into the tendrils. I have a plan." His plan turned out to be fairly simple. As a dealer of historical artifacts, he had channels of communication with some upper-level servants. He dug out a rather impressive gadget that he said dated from the mid-20th century. He put it up for sale as an object that the uppers would fight over. Moments later, he had an offer and an invitation to go up and meet some interested parties for him and his apprentice. They were sent special access codes that would get them up to the rainbow layer, and from there someone would escort them in the private tendrils lift. That lift had been added long after the city's construction and was not part of the main structure. It only went down to the top of the rainbow section of the city. They changed clothes on the way up. She put back on her servant's clothes over the clothes he had given her. He put on a coat of the colorful patterns of the servants. When they got to the top floor of the rainbow layers, a servant was already there waiting for them. "Follow me," he said, and led them through the hallways she had first entered on her way down at the start of this adventure. They got out of the lift into the familiar glass domes. The servant told them to wait while he went to announce them, and that he would fetch them when ready. "Go on, now's your chance," he said, and gave her a little nudge. "I'll tell them you had to go back down." She looked at him and smiled. "Thank you for everything you've done for me. I will find a way to visit you again someday soon." And with that, she set off to her compound. She neared her mother's residence before she really had time to begin to think how she would get back in. A door opened from a servant's side entrance. An older woman who had worked for her mother for years noticed her, and with a silent, quizzical look, she let her in. After she had washed off the grime from below and let the dress-pot dress her in rather plain-looking clothes, she settled back in and then turned off the decoy. She imagined she would feel the AI watchful gaze return to her. This had been a wonderful adventure, near-death experience and all. The next few days she slept well and spent the days reviewing the interactions between her decoy and the AI watcher. She figured out how to improve her decoy, so she felt sure that she could keep the watcher occupied for months if needed. Over the next few days, everything seemed different. She felt how she had changed. A new world of references was now in her mind, influencing how she saw and understood her everyday reality. Exactly what the butterfly had stirred in her. She was already planning her next venture down below. With each day that passed, her desire to go back down grew until she could stand it no longer. She gathered up some items she had laying around that she now knew were worth a lot of cash in the lower level. Then one late evening, during another one of the socialites' festivities, she set off. She had figured out how to gain access to the lifts that had brought her up using some clever social engineering. She had created a new identity and hired herself on her mother's staff. So now she could come and go as she pleased. Children of service staff were often given work in the upper houses, so her youth did not raise any eyebrows. She walked confidently through the streets that had so terrified her before. The smells that had overwhelmed her in her first visit now all had a pleasing undertone, the smell of freedom. Standing in front of Simon's workshop, she banged on the door. The smile that came over his face when he opened the door and saw her standing there warmed her heart. "Why, hello, Princess," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I was wondering if and when I might see you again. Can I get you something?" "No, thanks," she answered. "Not right now, anyway. I brought you something," she said, and put the bag she had on the work table. "I figured we could sell this and buy more things to fix. I really enjoyed working with you and would very much like to learn how to fix things and learn about our past history." He looked over the things in the bag wide-eyed. "This is quite the collection," he said, turning over the toothpick dispenser. "This one was made in the golden age of the spacers, I would guess. A time when the world was just emerging out of the 100 years of storms." He pulled out the toothpick and examined it incredulously. "It still works? I would not begin to know how to repair this one." They really knew how to build things to last in that time, he said, and looked over the other stuff she had brought. "This will get you more than you need to get your own workshop if you want it. Hell, you could buy up a dozen shacks here with that loot. Best keep it hidden for now." He moved two old items to the side. "I can sell these two without anyone noticing. Should get you enough spending cash to get you started on your own set of basic tools, and have enough spending cash to last you a few months." She smiled and nodded, ecstatic at this new life that was unfolding before her. Over the next few days, they were busy setting her up a work table in his workshop. He took her to some of the vendors on that floor, where she chose a few things to buy and repair. He taught her the haggling game. For many, it's the main source of fun, making a good deal and getting one over on someone, he explained. For the really good deals, you need to go down deep into the roots of the city. The diggers are always digging out new stuff, and often they are unaware of what treasures they are selling. He promised to take her down one day soon, explaining that the elevators only went down so far. After that, they would have to walk down through dark and stuffy tunnels that cut through the ground like an ant colony. During the days, they would work on their respective repairs and talk about everything and anything they found interesting. He would try his best to answer her endless stream of questions about the history of Oldest, the Spacers, and the city, while she would tell him about all the life forms she had learned about from the city library. Turned out that access to the city computers was only for the very privileged upper houses. What he knew about the world was mostly from word to mouth, with the occasional treasured book that had endured through the end of the world and the centuries since. The story she got from him was different from what she had been told growing up. In his version, Oldest had not fought for the Spacers. He had been one of the first Spacers, opening up the solar system for others to follow. Then the war began, and the world had come to an end, with the storms that covered from pole to pole for more than a century. It had been Oldest who had led the efforts to calm Mother Nature's rage, so that life on the planet could begin anew. It seemed clear that Oldest had been instrumental in the building of the city, yet it was unclear what his role had been in confining the human population to it. One story went that it had been punishment for some sin done by the city's ancestors. Another was that Oldest had fought and lost against the evil Spacers. It was hard to know what was true from the many layers of propaganda. Some days later, they prepared and left for a trip down into the roots. Simon closed the workshop, having tended all the time-sensitive repairs. They took the lift down as far as they could go. Every time the doors opened, she would glance around and think to herself that she would come back later and explore. The city was so massive, and this was only one of the skyscrapers. There were 5 other ones that were at least 2/3 the height of the one she lived in. It was impossible for her to imagine all those people working and living out their lives. She longed to explore all the towers and buildings of the city. That would have to wait for another time. They were going down below now. The lift went a short way below the ground level, and from there they walked over to broad sets of stairs that were divided by 3 railings, allowing people to flow up and down at varied speeds without constant traffic jams. Looking down the stairway, she saw windows into homes and shops cut into the ground around, lit up by lights on signs with hopeful advertisements. They walked down for hours. Her muscles had toned and gotten more used to this exercise from that first time. The feeling of growth and improvement gave her a sense of joy and motivation to continue this path, to dare to leave her comfort zone. They reached the level that opened up and spread out into every direction. It was hot and stuffy, with dust hanging visible in the air. This is the first market level. Here is where we begin to find the good stuff, Simon said, and explained the chaotic layout of the routes. They had grown organically over centuries as prospectors dug for minerals and valuables. A man with a thick beard, a head of unruly hair, and a big belly waved at Si when he saw him. "Si, you old dusty fart," he said with a friendly grin on his face. "We haven't seen you in ages. Too stuck up for your old dirty pals." Simon smiled and exchanged some banter with the man before moving on. A few steps later, and another similar encounter occurred. Then another and another. Simon was clearly well known here, and his attention much sought after by many vendors. They spent a few hours walking around, examining the wares on the tables and hanging from the ceiling. She had picked out a few things she found interesting, and after observing how Simon would negotiate the purchases, she tried herself. "You're a natural deal maker, my dear," said Simon proudly, and gave her a few tips. They sat down for a meal of fried fungus and some very bitter tea before they were going to head back up. The old cities used to cover nearly all the land of the planet. Centuries of human civilization leaving ruins and garbage behind. Most of it was useless junk, but in between there were treasures, he told her. The war spread quick when it started. Many places had to be abandoned, and when the climate control tech failed and the 100-year storms began, the earth got covered up in layers of sand and dirt. Lots of valuable and useful things from the pinnacle of our technology dug down, waiting for us to dig it up. She thought about this on the way up, feeling her worldview grow with every step. They got into a rhythm, buying and fixing things they found in the routes and then selling it to the upstairs. It was very lucrative, and soon they had a nice sum between them. She would often go by herself now, out to explore the rest of the city, and more often down into the routes. Other parts of the city, while very exciting at first, turned out to be more of the same. People finding ways to get by. She asked him about leaving the city, going out into the wildlands to explore. "Well, anybody can leave, and some do," he answered, as he was unscrewing the back of some mechanism. "Problem is, they never come back. We presume they are dead. How we do not know. Anyone who goes beyond the hills never returns." "What about space?" she asked. "Has anyone gone into space since the spacers left?" "No, not to my knowledge. The lifts up are closed and impenetrable. And even if we could get up to the station, there are no ships there to take us anywhere. The city is it, what is left of humanity. What about the spacers? And oldest? Don't you think they're out there somewhere? Unlikely. Space is really cruel to life. The stories say that is why the spacers turned on us down here. They grew hard and emotionless from staring into the void. He told her with a far-off look on his face. What do I know, though? The spacers might be out there somewhere doing spacers' things. And oldest, well, he was already ancient when the city was built. He's probably long gone by now. Just as he said that, she had a thought from the back of her mind. A thought that reminded her of how she had felt when she saw the butterfly that altered the course of her life. The thought told her that oldest was alive and that she would find him. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The routine of buying, fixing, and selling things, while seeking out knowledge about the city and the world history, kept her enthralled. She came to understand the challenges of the people down below, generations of people living to survive, keeping the city alive in a symbiosis. She met people who told her how the food production was constantly shrinking due to breakdowns and lack of diminishing seed stocks. The city kept itself going through the little buds, making repairs as guided by the city computers. But without constant attention and support from clever people, the life-sustaining parts would collapse. The extravagance of the upper houses did nothing to help. People down below just accepted them as the natural order of the world. So it was, and so it always would be. The karmic law. She had no real need for her profits from the repairs. So one day she began to lend it out to people she met who seemed to be doing good but needed a hand. She was quickly pulled into a community of people who were dedicated to helping, gaining access to treasured libraries and learning about the true state of things. It seemed that the eternal city was teetering on collapse. If there were not great changes made, then a lot of people were going to starve. How to save the city became her daily contemplation. She kept to her routine, though, fixing, selling, buying. It gave her the valuable sense of accomplishment in the face of the feeling of uselessness towards saving the city from imminent doom. While speaking with a girl with golden skin and green eyes, who Simon had introduced as one of the heads of the activists in the ground levels, she asked if they had considered overthrowing the upper socialites to rid the lowers of that burden. The girl went wide-eyed and answered that it could never happen, that the uppers were too smart and clever to ever lose to such as them. That made her laugh. She told the girl that the uppers were just a collection of dumb, self-absorbed people, that the city would be much better off without them. The girl was skeptical at first, but went on excitedly to ask her about the uppers. This was only the first such encounter. She would increasingly find an audience to listen to her, venting her distaste of her mother and the 20th century worshipping socialites. The lowers seemed never to have thought of resisting the uppers. It was just too unthinkable. Until now. With her unknowingly spreading the seeds of rebellion. Then one day, as she was scrounging around in the roots, she found something really interesting. It was at one of the many stalls with a few metal baskets full of stuff and junk that had been dug out from the ever-growing tunnels. She ran her fingers over some stacks of things when something shot her a little. She licked her finger that had borne the most of the current and looked at what had shocked her. It was a computer tablet. She picked it up absently without getting further grief, examined the cracked screen, and then turned it around. Her heart missed a beat. On the back was a symbol that she recognized. It was a mark that belonged to Oldest and his team. She had read about it. Circles within circles, surrounded by smaller circles, symbolizing something called the 500. There was precious little information on it, but it seemed that this had been the group of spacers who had built the city with Oldest, which might mean that this tablet might have belonged to one of the city builders. She had to have it. She looked up at the stall owner and saw that he was already looking at her. Damn, he had seen the interest on her face when she saw the tablet. This complicated the impending negotiation. "How much do you want for this?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement. The price he asked was laughable, but she kept a straight face and offered a third of what he had asked, in good haggling etiquette. No need for him to suspect the true value of it. He countered with only a tiny reduction of his original price, betting on the look he had seen on her face before. She was tempted to just pay up and be done with it, but she realized she'd better play out the expected haggle as not to raise suspicion. She gave it a second and then shrugged her shoulders, making sure not to look down again at the priceless tablet. She turned around and walked away, the blood screaming in her ears. "Wait, little lady, can you come back?" She felt the adrenaline explode into her body as she turned around and walked slowly back to the scrap dealer. "Deal," he replied with a smile, clearly pleased with the transaction. When she got back to the workshop, she placed the tablet on the workbench where she fixed things. She looked over every inch of it, took pictures in highest detail, and then got out the scanner to take a look inside. She wondered how it worked, what secrets it had held in its day. Even though any data it had once had would have long faded, the design of the machine itself would speak something of the minds that made it. There were clearly components in there, yet they were hard to make out. It seemed the tablet had been through some pretty rough times. She was hoping to make some discoveries before Simon returned. He had been increasingly busy, going to meetings all over the city. There were more and more people speaking about the need for dramatic change in how decisions were made for the survival of the city. Groups forming around varyingly extreme measures. She refused to join him in these meetings after the first few ones. The way people would look at her and want her to repeat the things she had spoken about, the immoral lazy uppers, reminded her of how she had felt as her mother's showpiece. So she preferred to stay in the workshop and tinker. The next morning, she was up even earlier than usual, excited to examine the 500 tablet further. Some hunch had her take more images of the inside of the decrepit machine, playing around with some settings to see if it would reveal more details. It worked. When she zoomed in deeper, she could see some difference when she compared with the images she had taken yesterday. Scrolling around the image of the tablet's inside was like looking over a map of a giant city. There were endless boxes and lines that she could hardly even guess at whose purpose. When Simon returned, he seemed very tired and somewhat distressed. Things are getting pretty crazy out there, he told her as he went to make some tea for himself. Lots more yelling and arguing than there used to be. Maybe that's a good thing, she said, holding the images out towards him. But never mind that, look at this. Her excitement evident as he took the images and looked them over. What am I looking at? She pointed to the tablet and told him the story so far. He was clearly interested, and moments later, visibly invigorated, his worries from the meeting forgotten. This thing may be from the same time as that toothpick gadget of yours. The peak moment of human ingenuity, he said as he stroked the insignia on the back of the tablet. Well, let me take a look inside. She decided to have a bite while he set the imager up and let it work its magic. A sandwich later, and she joined him again as he was comparing some images. This does not make sense, he said, squinting his eyes at them. It's as if the insides have changed since you first took the image. I really can't think of another way to explain it, but that makes no sense at all. He showed her what he meant, how some of the lines seemed to have moved ever so slightly. Some of the boxes seemed to have slightly less rounded edges. How long ago did you take those? He asked, pointing at the first images. Yesterday afternoon, she answered. All right, let's image the whole thing, and then I will take a few high-resolution, deep zoom images, and then we will repeat them tomorrow to see if we are right. You know, I think you're right, she said excitedly the next day. Something is definitely growing in there. Hopping around with excitement, it's repairing itself, she screeched happily, dancing around the room and whooping. I would hold back on your expectations, he said, clearly excited himself. A toothpick generator is one thing, but a centuries-old tablet regrowing complicated parts is another. Yes, I know that, she said, playing at being annoyed at his lack of faith. But it does not matter. The tablet just upgraded itself from an inert mass of glass and metal to an active relic from the city builders. I mean, if they can make a never-ending carbon toothpick dispenser, then what else could they have made? She sat down in her favorite chair and stared at the tablet as she drank some bitter juice. Imagine what they could do today if they were still around, if that was the state of their technology centuries ago. She wondered out loud.